The conference room on the 14th floor went completely still when the woman in the paint-stained jacket set a handwritten letter on the boardroom table. The executives had just finished laughing. Not loudly, people in suits rarely laughed loudly, but the kind of quiet, sidelong laughter that was somehow worse. The kind that said, "We don't need to say it out loud for you to know what we think of you." The CEO of Harlow Medical had personally asked security to escort her upstairs, certain this was a misunderstanding. Certain someone had let a contractor into the wrong elevator. Nobody recognized the jacket. Nobody saw past the dried paint on her left sleeve, or the child's drawing folded in her coat pocket. They didn't know they had just condescended to the woman who had built the clinic that became the hospital, that became the company they were all fighting over. The woman who still held 31% of everything they thought was theirs. Claire Sutton's daughter wouldn't let go of her hand. That was the first thing Elena Vasquez noticed when she glanced down from the reception desk on the 14th floor. A woman, maybe early 40s, standing in the marble atrium of Harlow Medical's downtown Toronto office, fingers laced with a small girl who couldn't have been older than 7. The child wore a yellow raincoat. The woman wore exhaustion like a second skin and something else, a quiet steadiness that didn't match the surroundings. Elena turned back to her screen. She had a board meeting in 11 minutes and a restructuring proposal that would determine whether Harlow Medical expanded its rural outreach division or dissolved it entirely into the new parent company's framework, Mrs. Vasquez. Her assistant, Jordan, appeared at her elbow. "That woman downstairs has been waiting 40 minutes. She says she doesn't have an appointment, but she needs to speak with whoever is in charge of the Alderton acquisition." Elena didn't look up. "Call down to reception. Tell them to take her information, and I'll have someone follow up. She won't leave her contact information. She says she'd rather wait, then she can wait in the lobby." Elena closed her folder. "I have a board meeting." She didn't see the way the woman's jaw tightened when a security guard approached. Didn't hear the little girl ask, "Mommy, why does he look angry?" The boardroom was all glass and gray carpet, and the particular kind of quiet that expensive buildings manufactured. Richard Holt sat at the head of the table, silver-haired, hands folded, the calm of a man who had already decided how the vote would go and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. He'd been COO of Harlow Medical for 8 years, longer than Elena had been CEO. Some days she felt it. "Elena, glad you made it." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Thomas has the numbers ready. We should be good to vote in 10. Thomas Gregg, the CFO, looked up from his laptop without smiling. He was methodical and humorless, and the most efficient person Elena had ever worked with. "Alderton's board confirmed this morning. If we vote yes today, we close in 30 days. I want another week on the community access clauses," Elena said, setting down her folder. Richard's smile didn't change, but something shifted behind it. "We've reviewed those clauses 3 times. "I know. I want a 4th, Elena." Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping into the register he used when he wanted to sound like a mentor. "Alderton isn't going to wait. We have a narrow window. If we don't move now, they will find another acquisition target, and we will have spent 8 months of legal fees on nothing. Then we'll spend 8 months and find a better offer." Thomas made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We're a medical holding company, not a charity. We're both." Elena opened her folder. Harlow Medical was built on the principle that rural communities deserve the same access to care as downtown clinics. "If this acquisition changes that—" "The founder has been gone for 3 years," Richard interrupted. "The world has changed. We can honor the past without being paralyzed by it." Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to remind Richard that she had been hired specifically because the board believed she would protect what made Harlow different. But Jordan appeared in the doorway, pale. "I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a situation downstairs." Richard waved a hand. "We're in the middle of security is involved. I thought you should know." Elena stood. "Start without me." She took the elevator down, expecting a disgruntled vendor or a confused patient advocate. What she found was something else entirely. 2 security guards flanked the woman in the paint-stained jacket near the main entrance. The little girl was pressed against her mother's side, crying quietly, her yellow raincoat bright and wrong against the gray marble. A small cluster of staff had gathered at a careful distance, some of them with their phones half raised. The front desk manager, a woman named Doris, who had been with Harlow since before Elena's time, stood between the guards and the woman with her arms slightly out, as though she could hold the situation in place by sheer will. "Ma'am, if you could just provide some identification." "I've explained who I am," the woman said. Her voice was even, controlled, the kind of controlled that came from practice. "I need 5 minutes with whoever is making decisions about the Alderton merger." You don't have clearance to be on this floor without an appointment. Then give me an appointment. Alina came down the last 3 stairs. The guard straightened. The woman looked up. Up close, she looked worse than she had from above. The jacket wasn't just paint-stained. It was the kind of worn that came from being worn every day because there wasn't another option. Her boots had been resoled. Her hair was pulled back quickly, not styled. But her eyes were steady, and she was holding her daughter with a kind of deliberate gentleness that made something tighten in Elena's chest. I'm Elena Vasquez, CEO. You wanted to speak with someone in charge? Yes. The woman shifted, keeping herself angled toward her daughter. I need to discuss the Alderton acquisition. Specifically, the terms regarding the Rural Care Division. Make an appointment through the proper channels. I tried. I was told the executive team doesn't accept external requests without a board referral. Are you a shareholder? The woman paused. Something like that. A new voice cut in from the elevator. Oh, this is impressive. Thomas came across the atrium, Richard a step behind him. Thomas was smirking, the particular smirk of a man who had never once doubted his own judgment. You interrupted a board meeting for this? Elena said, Thomas, look, I appreciate the commitment, but this is a corporate office, not a walk-in clinic. He turned to the woman with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. If you have a complaint about our services, there's a patient liaison number on the website. I'm not a patient. Then what are you? A journalist? A protester? He glanced at the little girl. Because bringing your kid doesn't make this more compelling, it just makes it uncomfortable for everyone. The little girl's crying got quieter, which was somehow worse than if it had gotten louder. Her name is Nora, the woman said. Still even, still controlled. And you don't get to speak to her like she's a prop. I'm not speaking to her at all. I'm speaking to you, and I'm telling you that you are in a private building without authorization, and if you don't leave voluntarily, Thomas. Elena's voice came out harder than she intended. Step back. He blinked. Elena, this is a waste of, I said step back. Richard put a hand on Thomas's arm. The gesture looked diplomatic. It wasn't. Elena, I understand the impulse, but protocol exists for a reason. We cannot have individuals making unscheduled demands on the executive team. It sets a precedent. Elena looked at the woman, at Nora in her yellow raincoat, at Doris, who was watching with the careful stillness of someone who had seen this situation before and knew how it usually ended. She thought about the board meeting upstairs, about Richard and his 11-minute countdown, about the Alderton deal and 30 days to close. You have 5 minutes, she said. Conference room B. Conference room B was small and windowless and smelled like old coffee. Elena sat across from the woman and her daughter, who had stopped crying and was now studying the room with large, serious eyes. Talk, Elena said. The woman was quiet for a moment. Then she said the Alderton acquisition includes a clause in Schedule F of the operational framework, subsection 12. It allows Alderton to restructure or discontinue any service line deemed financially non-viable within 24 months of closing. No board approval required. Elena's hands went still on the table. How do you know what's in that contract? Because I've read it. That document is confidential. 3 people outside the legal team have access to the full text. The woman reached into her jacket and set a USB drive on the table. The clause will eliminate every rural care partnership Harlow has built over the past decade, the Northern Ontario clinics, the fly-in care programs, the First Nations community health agreements. All of it gone within 2 years. Richard told me those programs were protected under the acquisition framework. Richard lied. The woman's voice didn't change. He's been in contact with Alderton's restructuring team for 6 months. He's negotiated a personal consultancy contract worth $400,000, contingent on the merger closing. Thomas has a similar arrangement. Elena stared at the USB drive. If you're making accusations of this magnitude, I'm not making accusations. It's documented. The woman nodded toward the drive. Emails, financial disclosures, draft contracts. I've spent 4 months putting it together. Why bring it to me? Why not go directly to the board or the authorities? The woman looked at her daughter for a moment. Nora had pulled a small sketchbook from somewhere and was drawing quietly, her tongue between her teeth. Because I wanted to give you the chance to fix it from inside, the woman said. Before it goes any further, why would you care what happens inside this company? The woman met her eyes. Because I'm the one who built it. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat in her home office with the USB drive open across 3 monitors and read everything. Twice. Then a 3rd time, more slowly, following the money through layers of shell structures and forwarded emails until she found where it ended. Richard Holt had been steering the Alderton acquisition for 2 years, not as a neutral COO but as an interested party. His personal consultancy deal was buried in a holding company registered in his wife's maiden name. Thomas had a similar arrangement, smaller but no less deliberate. Together, they had manipulated the valuation reports to make Alderton's offer look competitive when the independent analysis suggested Harlow was worth 40% more on the open market. And buried in Schedule F, exactly where the woman had said it would be, was the clause that would end every rural care program Harlow had ever built. Elena sat back and looked at the ceiling. She thought about the 7 years she'd spent building this team, about the way Richard had mentored her through her first board presentation, coached her through the shareholder meeting 2 years ago, told her she was doing exactly what Harlow needed. She had trusted him. She had trusted him completely. Her phone lit up. An unknown number, she answered. You've read it. Not a question. Who are you? Elena said. Actually, a pause. My name is Claire Sutton. I founded Harlow Medical 12 years ago with my husband David. David died 3 years ago. When he died, I couldn't. A brief stop. I stepped back. I thought the team I'd built would hold. I didn't check in the way I should have, and by the time I realized what Richard was doing, it had gone too far to stop quietly. Elena closed her eyes. Claire Sutton. She knew the name from the company's early documentation, from the photos in the Harlow medical history printed in the annual report. A woman in her 30s standing in a converted farmhouse in Muskoka, laughing, holding a sign that read Opening Day, Sutton Rural Health Clinic, the clinic that became the company. You've been gone 3 years, Elena said. I've been raising my daughter alone. Claire's voice was quiet. And watching my husband's work get taken apart from the inside. Why come now? Because Richard is close. Once the vote passes, it's done. I couldn't wait any longer. And the way you came today, the paint on your jacket, no appointment, no lawyers, that was deliberate? Another pause. I needed to see what kind of people were running this company now, what they did when someone showed up who didn't fit. Elena thought about Thomas in the atrium, about Richard's diplomatic hand on Thomas's arm. We failed you, she said. You stopped it, Claire said. That's different. Elena called an emergency board meeting for 7 the next morning. She sent the evidence to the 2 board members she trusted most, Patricia Chow and Neville Bernard, at 2 a.m., with a note that said, read everything before you come in. She didn't call Richard. She didn't call Thomas. At 6:50, Richard walked into the building and found 2 members of the audit firm already in the boardroom, a legal team he didn't recognize setting up on the left side of the table, and Elena standing at the window with a coffee she hadn't touched. What is this? He said. A board meeting. Elena turned. Sit down, Richard. His face did something complicated. Elena, if this is about yesterday's visitor, it's about Schedule F, subsection 12, it's about Meridian Advisory Services and the $400,000 contingency contract you failed to disclose. It's about the valuation reports that made a 40% undervaluation look like fair market price. She paused. Sit down. He sat. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Patricia had brought a forensic accountant. Neville had called their legal counsel from the highway. Claire Sutton arrived at 9, Nora at her side with a coloring book tucked under one arm, and the boardroom went very quiet when she walked in. Richard recovered first. He always recovered first. Claire, I didn't know you were involved in this. No, Claire said. You didn't. She sat across from him and set her hands flat on the table, and the board voted 3 hours later to suspend Richard Holt and Thomas Gregg pending a full independent investigation. The Alderton acquisition was halted. The vote was 7-2. Richard left without speaking. Thomas tried to argue and was quietly, firmly walked out by the legal team. When the room emptied, Elena and Claire sat alone for a moment in the gray afternoon light. What happens now? Elena said. That's up to you. Claire looked out the window. I'm not coming back as CEO. That's not. Nora needs me present. David needed me present, and I missed that, trying to run everything. I'm not making that mistake again. Then what do you want? I want the rural programs protected in the company's governing documents, not just policy, legally binding. I want an independent ethics review every 2 years. And I want someone running this company who actually believes the mission isn't just a line in the annual report. She looked at Elena. Do you believe it? Elena thought about the meeting she'd been rushing to when all of this started. About Richard's voice saying, we can honor the past without being paralyzed by it. About the way Thomas had looked at Nora in her yellow raincoat. Yes, Elena said, I do. Then stay. The weeks that followed were brutal in the particular way that institutional crises were brutal, not explosive, but grinding. The independent investigation confirmed everything on the USB drive and found 2 additional financial irregularities the original evidence hadn't caught. The auditors were thorough and unhurried, and the results were damaging. Richard's legal team issued a counter-narrative within 10 days. He gave an interview to a business news outlet claiming the evidence had been selectively compiled by a grieving widow trying to reclaim a company she'd abandoned. He used that word deliberately. Abandoned. He said Claire Sutton had walked away from her responsibilities at the worst possible time and was now destabilizing a successful company out of misplaced sentiment. Elena watched the interview from her office and felt something cold settle in her chest. She called Claire. "I saw it," Claire said. She sounded tired. "He's not wrong that I stepped back. He's wrong about why. He knows that. He's counting on the people listening not to care. Then we tell them why." Elena had been thinking about this since the interview ended. Not through lawyers, not through press releases. We tell them the same way you told me, directly. We show them what's at stake. I'm not a public person, Elena. You don't have to be. Just be honest. A pause. Be the person who built those clinics. The press conference happened on a Tuesday morning in the Harlow Medical Atrium. No podium, no prepared media package. Just Elena at a microphone and Claire standing beside her, Nora sitting on a chair against the wall with her coloring book open to a page of horses. Elena spoke first. She was precise and unflinching. The evidence, the timeline, the investigation's findings, the vote. She didn't editorialize. She didn't need to. Then Claire spoke. She talked about David, about the farmhouse in Muskoka where they'd run the first clinic out of 2 examining rooms and a donated ultrasound machine, about the reason they'd started, a winter storm that had kept a woman in labor from reaching the nearest hospital in time, and the thing that had happened because of that, and the decision she and David had made afterward that they would build something so that it never happened again in that community. She talked about stepping back after he died, about the guilt of it, the necessity of it, the 3 years of choosing Nora's stability over institutional oversight, the moment 6 months ago when she'd realized what Richard was doing and understood that she couldn't stay quiet anymore. "I should have been paying closer attention," she said. "That's on me." But what Richard and Thomas did, using this company as a vehicle for their own financial interests, while dismantling the programs that were keeping people healthy in communities no one else was serving, that's on them. The questions from reporters were sharp and many. Elena answered the corporate ones. Claire answered the others. One journalist asked, "Mrs. Sutton, do you think Harlow Medical can recover from this?" Claire looked at Nora for a moment. Nora was coloring, unconcerned, the top of her head bent over a brown and white horse. "I think institutions recover the same way people do," Claire said. "By being honest about what went wrong, by making it right, and by not pretending either of those things is easy." The following months were not easy. The stock dropped 17% in the first week. 2 institutional investors pulled back. The Alderton deal collapsed entirely, which was the point, but the market didn't read it that way initially, and there were several board meetings where the numbers looked genuinely frightening. Elena cut executive compensation across the board, including her own salary, by 30%. She brought in an independent director specifically to oversee financial disclosures. She created a staff ethics committee with actual authority. Claire came in once a week, sometimes twice. She brought Nora when school was out. Nora had strong opinions about which conference room had the best natural light and had developed a friendship with the woman who stocked the mailroom, who saved her the cardboard from shipping boxes so she could make things. One afternoon, Elena came back from a meeting with the bank to find Nora sitting on the floor of the main corridor with a large cardboard horse she had constructed and painted, mostly brown, with one yellow ear. "That's very good," Elena said. "I know," said Nora. "Her name is Clementine." Elena laughed, the first real laugh she could remember in several weeks, and went to find Claire. Claire was in the small boardroom, reviewing the new rural partnership agreements that had been rewritten with proper legal protections. She looked up when Elena came in. "Nora is in the hallway. I know. She said she needed space for Clementine." "Who is Clementine? The horse." Elena sat down. "The Northern Ontario programs are going to be operational again by spring. We have confirmation from 3 of the 5 First Nations community health coordinators that they want to re-engage the agreements." Claire set down her pen. "Really?" Elena folded her hands. "It's not back to where it was. It'll take another 2-3 years to rebuild what got cut. But it's moving." Claire was quiet for a moment. "David would have hated all of this," she said. "The media stuff, the legal process. He was a very private person. He didn't like fighting in public. But he believed that if something was worth building, it was worth protecting." She picked up her pen again. "He used to say it to the staff when things were hard. If this doesn't matter enough to fight for, maybe it doesn't matter enough to build." Elena looked at the window. Outside, Toronto was gray and moving, the lake somewhere past the buildings, the city going about its afternoon. "I'm going to stay," Elena said. Not because Claire had asked. She hadn't asked again. Not because I think I've done this right, or because I think the last 3 months prove anything about my judgment, but because I think this company is still worth the fight, and I think I know that more clearly now than I did before. Claire looked at her for a long moment. Good, she said. Richard's case went to the Ontario Securities Commission 8 weeks after the investigation concluded. Thomas cooperated early and received a reduced penalty in exchange for his testimony. Richard did not cooperate. His legal team was expensive and strategic, and the process was slow and unsatisfying in the way institutional accountability often was. He was eventually barred from serving as a corporate officer or director in Canada for 15 years and ordered to repay the undisclosed compensation, plus penalties. It wasn't enough. Elena had wanted more. Claire had wanted more. Most of the staff had wanted more. But it was what there was, and they worked with it. The moment Elena knew something had genuinely shifted came 6 months after the press conference, in the form of an email from a nurse practitioner in Red Lake, Ontario. Ms. Vasquez, I've worked in this community for 11 years. Last winter, we nearly had to close 2 days a week because we couldn't cover operating costs after the program funding was cut. Then the new agreement came through. We reopened our Friday hours last month. 3 people came in on that first Friday who hadn't been seen in 8 months because they couldn't get to the city. One of them had a situation we caught early. I don't know if you understand what early means in a community like this. It means everything. Thank you. Elena forwarded it to Claire with no message. Claire wrote back 4 words. This is the point. On the day Claire formally stepped down as a board observer, she had never taken an official seat, had never wanted one. She brought Nora to the office for the last official time. Nora was nearly 8 now, a grade ahead in reading, deeply interested in horses and marine biology, and inexplicably the history of Canadian railways. She walked the atrium with the authority of a child who had spent enough time somewhere to feel that it was, in some small way, hers. Is this the last time we're coming? Nora asked. We can still come, Claire said. We just won't come as much, because you fixed it. Claire glanced at Elena, who had come down to walk them out. Because we helped fix it, Claire said, and now other people are going to keep it fixed. Nora considered this. Then she said with complete seriousness, Clementine should stay. So the building has something good in it. Clementine, the cardboard horse, had been living in the small boardroom for 4 months, slightly battered at the edges, but structurally sound, positioned in front of the window where, Nora had explained, the light was best. I think we can arrange that, Elena said. Nora nodded, satisfied. At the door, Claire stopped. She looked back at the building the way people looked at things they had poured themselves into. Not with sentimentality, exactly, but with the particular attention of someone taking stock. He would be glad, she said, not to anyone specifically. Elena understood she meant David. I think so too, Elena said. Claire and Nora walked out into the gray October morning. Elena stood at the glass door and watched them go, a woman in a paint-stained jacket and a small girl in a yellow raincoat walking together through the ordinary city toward whatever came next. Then she went back upstairs, sat down at her desk, opened her email, and got back to work. There was still a great deal of it left to do. There always would be, but for the first time in a long time, that felt like a reason to stay rather than a reason to run.